Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Off Angle. We are here with episode 18. Got Kassad on once again for today. Pleasure to have you on again, my friend. Last time you were here, we've got to mention it briefly. I know we've just talked about it, and people know what's coming already, I think. But last time you were here, we were kind of joking a little bit, EG, or, very sad, or go 03, we don't like EG, and we were maybe all in the same sort of position. Since then, you've kind of become the harbinger of doom for this team, to be honest, right? The Grand Slam and all that is comical, but in a way also a little bit sad. My quick question to pose, right, is do we now have to just start worrying for the team in general? We've had this kind of period of like EG, the organization's not run very well. They've got 9 teams going on, whatever. But now we're in a position where the main team can't make it to the major, can't make it to the RMR even. Are we now, is it over for this team? Like what is gonna happen?
I mean, it's really sad when you think about it. Like, I keep saying the same thing. I don't really hate the players. I have nothing against the players. I'm sure they're trying their best. But the things like the EG as an organization, as a name, it's highly respected. It has a massive legacy, right?
Mm.
And you expect them to be the championship team and everything, and they didn't qualify for the major, didn't qualify for the RMR. They, they were dead last in the Pro League for the 4th consecutive time, I think, or something like that, or
Yeah.
3 in a row, and they had like 1 win in the last one. But the thing is, like, you have to, at some point, I even tweeted about this. At some point, you have to admit, like, listen, this blueprint project or whatever it is they're trying to do has failed. It's done. Like, if they go out publicly and say that, like, listen, this is failed, we are turning the new page, we are gonna do this and this and that, like, that's fine, that's okay, it's no problem. But if they could keep pretending like nothing is happening and trying to push through this thing, just gonna end up like being dead last on every single event they play. Even though they got a hero invite for Dallas, which I think it's kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous. But
Yeah.
it's whatever. Like, I can compare it to the Renegades getting the invite for, oh yeah, I am Sydney back in the day. I mean, it's understandable to some degree, but the point of EG is like, listen, guys, like, just admit that the project has failed. You have more than 3.5 months for the start of the next season. That's a lot of fucking time, right? You can just go and reorganize stuff, get new players, create a plan, plan that's gonna work for the next couple of years. You certainly have the money, unless people back out, which is, I mean, not really impossible at this point, right? But the thing is, like, you cannot really go out of CS and sell your spots in Blast and ESL. It's not the way to go because you're gonna lose money, and it's ridiculous. So you have a lot of time to get your, ducks in a row and start doing it well from the next season, and things can turn around quickly, like if you do things right. You have so many organizations that turn good bad times into good one very quickly, and the other way around. It's not impossible. You just need the right people, and you just need the right mindset, and that's all.
I think the first question I have to ask too is it's not just about the team, but it's also about like the fact is that when this whole blueprint project started and they picked up 3 teams simultaneously and they did all this stuff where they were trying to say, hey, look, we've got all these people, we're supporting NA. That was kind of the dominant narrative at the time. If people don't remember it, people were saying, oh, at least these teams are getting salaried. Yeah, they can't compete in a major qualifier if they're not the main team, but at the very least they can say, look at us, we're getting money, we're staying to, follow our dream. And then maybe eventually when interest returns to NA, we can have these teams be picked up by other orgs and they can actually pursue the major dream, right? That was sort of like some of the ideas, some of the apologia, if you want to call it that, that was circulating around this move. Now we're many, many months down the line, right? It's been a long time with all of this stuff being developed. We don't see any significant renewed interest in NA at this point. Do we have to ask ourselves now? Like, I want to pose the question because I feel like most people just still kind of take it for granted. Is it actually even good and worth it for the other players of EG? Like, they're collecting a salary, but they're not able to go deeper than the actual main EG squad. I mean, they could potentially, but they're not even able to try. Like, it kind of feels like EG, I guess, a more cynical take on what they did would have been to say, here are these teams that were beating our team in domestic competitions. Let's sign them and then take them out of the opportunity entirely, which is obviously like a shoot yourself in the foot kind of move because you want the best team, not like to artificially make it so that your current roster is inflated or something domestically. But what we've seen is that, like, I remember the Party Astronauts team. You know, I think they could have potentially made. I think they probably would have made it to the RMR if we had sort of
Absolutely.
transposed them into the future now. But they didn't even get a chance to qualify. So at this point, can we even say it's worth it for the other sub teams that are on the contract with EG? I feel like maybe it's not. And obviously, this is a question maybe should be posed to them specifically. But Kassad, I want your opinion on it. Like, do you believe that this is actually beneficial for NA as a whole, or at this point is it obvious that really it was not even beneficial for EG, as you were saying?
As was it worth? Absolutely not, because this approach of like getting the 3 teams, blueprint project, 15 players, 10 coaches, like whatever, right? It's just amateur for me. I don't think that's a right way to save the NACS. Like, you know what you need to do? You are partners with ESL, right? Liquid is a partner with ESL. Furia right now, I don't know if they're a partner or not, but Liquid is definitely. Complexity is a partner. So
Yeah.
let's get some money together as a three organizations plus what we can get. Get some money from ESL slash Faceit, which are a single company right now, and get some money for a budget for like a couple of years to run the Academy League. Like similar to Vplay, let's say 8 to 16 teams, academy teams, one each, right? It can be the e.g. Academy team, Cloud9, whatever, like the lineups you can name, like different complexity, Furia, all these teams, right? And then have 4 seasons of competition with like 4 land finals and the ultimate like grand, what similar to what Blast is doing with like the grand final, whatever you call it, right? And then see in those like 4 seasons, different competitions, how many young talents, how many kids are gonna pop up. You don't need to pay them $10,000 a month. They can take a rookie slash development contract, in the academy league for what 6 to 12 months. That is backed by ESL Faceit, that is backed by these organizations that are wasting money today on some players who are being paid $30,000 to be last place on every event. $30,000 for a single player or $20,000 can fuel the whole month of academy team.
Yes.
And you are spending it on a single player who is performing nothing, right? So even if you have the money from ESL Faceit and all this, organize it, like come up with a business plan. This is how we save the NA. This is how we find new Stewie, new Naf, new Elige, new all these players, right? This is how we approach, and we give the Academy League for 2, 3, 5 years, and we're gonna keep growing it. Then you can sign like that new Stewie, that new Elige into the normal, like the main EG squad, the main complexity squad, the main liquid squad. Doesn't really matter, right? But that's the way you go for it. It's not going to be solved in 6 months, but in about a year, I can guarantee you 3 or 4 good players will arise that are capable enough to compete. Send those teams, in the meantime, between the competitions, send them into Europe for like a 2-week, 3-week boot camp to play against the best teams all the time, even to play the Vplay Academy League if possible, because some of these teams, they have the facilities in Europe. Obviously, there is Liquid in Netherlands. They have their own facility there. Complexity can afford the boot camps. There is everywhere in Europe. Obviously, you can get a good price with these people who are organizing those boot camps for the academy teams. Things can be done, right? Instead of that, we're just gonna sign. We're just gonna go with a plan with 35 people in the staff and 40 different teams, and just try to make it work. Meanwhile, locking these people of actually competing on the RMR, and on top of that, it's not even kids. It's Stanislav with 28 years old, Ponelon with 30, with 29, 30, Rush, and all these teams, all these players who are kind of a veterans already, right? They're not in the academy. If I'm Stan right now or Rush, I'm gonna become a coach. I'm gonna go to EG and say, listen, give me this. It's to be like the coach of academy team. I'm gonna find my talents. I'm gonna coach them. When you prepare the next IGL in North America, I'm gonna be that guy. Instead of he's playing something like advanced DSCAs or some bullshit, and he's not helping himself. EG is not helping this. There are ways to help NA. This is not one of them. I just presented you just the first thing on top of my head. You just need capable people to do it.
It seems like the developmental kind of logic is there already, if that makes sense. Like that seems to be what they maybe went in with after picking up these 3 teams. The whole blueprint thing seems like, they want to develop, and we've obviously seen a few players come up from those teams, but ultimately into like the wrong environment. It's too fast, it feels like, right? So unless they are a wonder kid, they're not really going to put up the numbers that they need to. So I think that you're really onto something in the sense that, take the maybe what they see as well-meaning intentions, and then come away and create something that actually works properly, that we already have a little bit, to use the word again, a blueprint for in Europe, right? How popular the We Play Academy League is, and how effective it's been at discovering talents. We've seen a number of Bit and Munisi are the two to name, Hetrick, more recently, Chiron.
Chiron.
There's so many.
There's players.
I think some of the Spirit players might have technically started there as well. So, it just feels like this is already an idea that they could work from, that they could bring up. But I think they're maybe sunk cost fallacy at this point. Like, you know what I mean? That eventually it's got to pan out. But I will say it's a bit of a dark humor sort of chuckle when you put the picture in, Pronogo, of them being in last place and there's no other teams at all yet.
I have to interrupt you, but there is a perfect opportunity. You see what happened to BTS?
Yeah.
Yes. To see that you're shutting down and they have no money. Just imagine if you are ESL or these orgs and everything, you just make a partner of them and make like a BTS Academy League, and you fuel them with money and just get those teams. They have the facilities, they have the manpower, they can do it, right?
Yeah,
it can
be done before. They've done all these events
before. It can be done, but it's like all these people are just narrow-minded, just looking like this, and they don't see anything beside their own vision, and that's it. And that's the problem right there.
Yeah. It's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating, to say the least, that we don't have, the openings and sometimes the right people in the right spots, I think. And, people get caught up on social media. I definitely feel that's something that's happened, with EG, is that they're just kind of trying to look good and be a little bit of a house of cards kind of thing, you know what I mean? That it just might take, another event or whatever. Because surely the team, I don't know whether the team's popular enough, right? They bring back a few names and whatnot. They obviously start off with the likes of Stewie, who's got a big personality. I don't know if their jersey sales is enough or whatever. I don't really know where this team is actually getting its money from. Obviously it's got to be all venture capital, but I don't think there's going to be much return on them being a popular team, or them being a team that NA wants to get behind. It's like in CS, you're absolutely not getting behind EG. What's the point? So maybe the league team carries it a fair bit. I don't know, but surely this project is now starting to really cost them money, make them look silly. I don't follow League of Legends too much, but I don't hear many rumblings around EG's league team. I don't know if they're, super strong or super popular over there. Obviously, they've got the franchise spot and everything, which works a bit differently. But I don't know. I can't see why you wouldn't move into something else with this team at this point, because it just... Yeah, not making the RMR. There's one level where it's like you've tried something new and different to bring in all these teams, right? Big coaching staff, let's mix and match. But when it's not working on a competitive level domestically, you surely have to change something. You surely have to maybe even just fully abandon what's gone on and try and sell those teams, back to different owners or something. I don't know, because it's just kind of silly. I could maybe see a world in which not making the major itself was possible, I suppose. Maybe you get upset or something like that, but when you're not even making the RMR, for God's sake, there's just no excuse. There's just no excuse.
What I will say is that I think the biggest thing, and it's something that we've all been railing against for a while, is actually the upper management over there in EG. And that seems to be where a lot of this rot is spreading from, right? We think about, for people who haven't seen the Thorin video about EG being a clown org, this is released. This is not the most recent one. It's the one that came out before. One of the things that was a revelation in there was that they apparently, at the higher ups at EG, had said that they needed a world-class player, and Stewie was going to be that player. Stewie has not been a world-class player in a long, long time. His sort of exodus from Liquid was sort of precipitated on the fact that he had a very poor attitude for competitors and also didn't really put up the numbers. And those were twofold reasons that are totally valid for removing him from Liquid at that point. And then he comes to EG under the guise that he's going to be their franchise star player, superstar player. You only say this if you're super behind the times or just have no idea what you're talking about, right? It's like those are the only two things you can think of at that point for explanations of why that would be the motivation to pick up a player like this, right? The impetus to do that in the first place is like, yeah, let's go ahead and go. We need a domestic superstar. You're not thinking about you know, you might be thinking about some of the Liquid players. You're not going to be thinking about Stewie for that, right? And so that's just the first thing that comes to my mind is like these people just don't know what they're doing.
Exactly. The thing is, like, when it comes to Stewie, it's just you know, you don't sign him as a superstar franchise player. You
Yeah.
sign him as an X Factor player, right? Well, something that Tarek did in NRG. He wasn't like even close to the best player in that team, but he had that like little thing with himself and his style that he can contribute as an X Factor and just
Yes.
bring you the important job. This is was, in my opinion, if you want to keep Stewie at that initial lineup a year and well, what was like 14, 15 months ago when they started the whole thing. If you want to keep Stewie as a personality there because he's the NA, he won the major, all these things, the Grand Slam with Liquid, that's fine. You know, that's fine. That's all good. But you put him in a position where he's like an X Factor player and you build around young, you know, or talented, up and coming players together with some already developed ones, right? They went and did completely everything wrong, and you know they're paying the price for it. They just that's it. Like they spent a lot of money, they failed in everything they did, and it is what it is at this point, right? They can't really go back in it. They can just stop. I'm still surprised the team has not yet been, you know, uh, torn apart or
Yeah.
removed or benched or whatever they left themselves or whatever. It's just at this point, you know, you have to admit it it doesn't work. Or if you even if you're a player, like you need to go to the management and say, listen, whatever we do is not working. Like maybe we are practicing every day, something is not working. We need to change something, the mindset, the everything. I don't even know what the coaching staff are doing there, like because the whole situation is a little bit fucked for me because you have Warburg, who is the head coach, but you also have a Malek guy who is very clever and intelligent. He was in the major finals, you know,
Yeah.
with that G2 lineup. He's nowhere to be seen. He's not posting anything. He's not like, you know, on the events at least. We don't see him as well. Like, where is he? Like, what is he doing? Why is he there? Like, give him the like, if you want to change something, give him the keys for the next 6 months or year. And he let him bring his own and implement his own strategy. That would be a move. That's fine. He has the experience. He earned the credit with G2 that gives them that experience. I don't know if he is actually going to be good or not, because I don't know how much experience he has by now with North American players. But does he have the credit? Yes. You brought in Warburg, the guy who is like who coached the Copenhagen Flames,
Yeah.
and
But
that's his
it
only
should be
team that
noted
he coached.
he coached that team the second time they made the major. I feel like he was probably just an interim coach though. Like they obviously lost. I think it was Peta from
Yeah.
NIP fame who coached them during the first run. The second run, he was technically behind them, but looked more like a hype man. I mean, we don't know
Yeah.
because there were no interviews around that, but I just feel like he wasn't like a tactical kind of coach. He was the energy guy. He was like the sort of, I think at that point he was still serving as CEO or something. So he's like, dude, I believe in you. He's like
definitely
Jason Lake
GM.
in complexity. Yeah. So it's like, you know, whatever the case may be there. It's like he's giving me vibes of like the really involved team owner or something who wants his team to win. But
The thing
probably,
is,
I
like,
don't know if that's enough. Like you can't just say, oh yeah, now coach my
that's
division for that, you know.
that's not a thing. A coach needs to be involved in the game, but we
Yeah.
don't know like in what degrees here because we're just speculating here, right?
Right. Yeah.
The thing is like, even if he's massively involved in the game, like, is it the right choice? The guy coached a Danish team with Danish speaking people with that mentality, with all these things, right? And then you're switching him over the Atlantic to coach the North American team with the CSIGL, who never spoke English before in his team, or like
Oh
he
yeah.
spoke. It just makes no sense. Like somebody, I like okay, somebody who made those decisions. Does that person have like an advisor at least, or some assistant who can tell me, listen, maybe just maybe this isn't a good idea? You know, instead of going on, even Neelan himself said at some point that, you know, I was surprised, you know, that I got called up.
Yes.
Like,
He thought it was a prank or something because I think it came through Steam messages. That was the only way they could reach him or something. So it's
yeah,
like,
I mean, it's just it
what?
makes no sense. So many things makes no sense. But we spoke before, like that there was like zero chance for them to succeed in this kind of environment, in this kind of setup, and this kind of lineup. You know, it's just the positive thing for them right now is the fact that they have the partnership spots and they have the money, so they can reorganize. But are they going to do it? I don't know, because they're not announcing anything. We just saw that they're playing Dallas, and that's it. It's whatever.
Yeah. Still waiting for big change, right, Scriv?
Yeah, I think so. EG in the mud. We all knew that already, but you know when Kassad's on, we've got to talk about it a little bit. Cool. Let's talk about Pro League here. I think that's going to be the main focus of what we got to talk about. There's a couple things that I want to tackle first before maybe we talk about results. I want to kick
first
off...
thing, EG is last place again. Oh, we already
right. Yeah.
God damn it.
Of course, the first one's out, first one's to go. I think kind of expect, but I mean, you know, IHC are doing better than you. It's kind of a
and they're even
a
memeing
difficult
on you.
one, man.
That's
Yeah,
the
that was sad with the exit interview.
Like the people who are actually playing their third event, the big one. They played the major, they played Katowice, and they played here, and they're memeing on EG.
Yeah, they're like, sorry, we don't feel too happy about this win.
Like, but it's EG, you know. It's like
yeah.
Mental.
Classic.
Really.
Absolutely
They gained
mental.
a lot of fans from that interview. I guarantee.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Big up IHC. I just wanted to talk about sort of the general feel to begin with, right?
Sure.
We've obviously had a big change up when it comes to the broadcast on this one. There are less analysts, there are more casters, there is more free-flowing show format going on. It doesn't feel like a big proper event just yet. Maybe it'll scale into that once, you know, the playoff stages come about. But I really like it. I really like it. They've got the dart blasters. I don't think they're allowed to call them Nerf guns, technically. Even though that's kind of what we would assume,
we all think
you know.
about it. That's like if they ever get sponsored by Bing, you'll never be able to say Google that on a broadcast again, right? That's the kind of vibe we're talking about.
But they have a little system going, yellow card, red card, and all that kind of stuff. I think that's quite funny. They are allowing the talent a lot more freedom, which I think is something that we've wanted for a while, is to just let them flex their muscles a little bit. I think there are, you know, some smart moves being made as well. It's obviously all down to bettering the broadcast, but there's a little bit of rumblings behind the scenes that, you know, everybody's asking for too much money. So I think they're giving people more to do in order to justify those day rates, which I think is certainly a factor that plays in. But ultimately, it looks like a lot of fun, and I think it has a little bit more of a feeling, especially of British sports and the way that, you know, they're all kind of played out, and maybe a little bit, you know, you mentioned the NBA being kind of laid back. I don't watch much of the NBA, to be honest with you, but it feels like, you know, it's a very laid back kind of setup. They're having fun. There's a few yoink and twists in there. I noticed that Harry has taken a game from a TV show called Mock the Week. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but one of the legendary British panel shows and whatnot.
Okay.
And they do news headlines and stuff like that. You know, what is the headline in a jokey fashion, and then maybe eventually someone guesses what the headline actually is. There's good content to be had from there. There's another one where you get like a picture and they give you just sort of like the starting letters of each word. It makes up a sentence, and then you kind of throw in, you know, your guesses. So I think there's a lot of potential here to, if they're going to have this laid back kind of vibe coming into Pro League, a lot of potential to make it a fun show. And I think I've found myself watching, you know, more of and paying more attention to the in-between sections, as it were. Now, is it good for, you know, bettering the knowledge of Twitch chat and all that kind of stuff? Probably not. I'm not sure if they're going to take it in, to be fair, but you know, there is a little bit of an element missing for, I think, a more hardcore fan base that really want to break down the games and know how we ended up here and whatnot. But when it comes to having a bit more fun, having a bit more banter, there's way more interviews. They've got all the players coming and sitting around, you know, and sometimes the entire team. We had a pretty good little section, if you guys caught the section from Epic LAN. I don't know if you've seen this clip, but there's a clip that went viral where some guy was defusing. He stood up and chatted shit, you know, and then got off the bomb and lost the game.
Love that.
And that apparently made it in to one of the news segments or whatever that they've done. But I really like the way it feels. I really like the way that it looks. I think that with Pro League, it's like 6 weeks of Counter-Strike, man. We can't be suiting and booting the whole time and, you know, super serious each and every day. Maybe when we get round to the finals, for sure. But it's always felt like an event that doesn't have the gravitas behind it, right? We've got Cologne, we've got Katowice. Maybe they're going to build Rio into something like that as well. Dallas is, you know, a little bit more NA heritage and stuff like that, I suppose. But definitely Cologne and Katowice are the two that have the history and have the poignancy behind them and all that kind of stuff, right? And Pro League's always felt like something that just gets thrown in the middle. It's got all the games, all the teams, all the Counter-Strike going on. You know, you can always tune in and find a game. I don't know about you guys, but I find it very difficult to watch every single game of Pro League, for example, you know, just because there's so many games going on sometimes when they got the A and the B streams and all this kind of stuff. So I think that changing that feel up is really something that is going to attract the viewers into just watching a bit more, maybe having it on in the background. It seems like, you know, they have conceded that they feel this is a tournament that might just go up on your second monitor while you're at work or while you're, you know, doing what it is that you're doing with your day on the main screen, as it were. So yeah, overall, I like this change. I like the fact that the broadcast is a bit more laid back. It does harken back to ECS days when they did their group stages. They were always really chill. It just seems like, you know, they've been able to scale things up in a really good way. So yeah, what do we think about the new feel to EPL?
You've given me flashbacks to when Thorin was talking about big hands. If you guys know the reference, I think it was an ECS event or something to that effect. You know, big hands, really good for artificially inseminating horses or some shit. It was for something really fucking wild, you know, just totally
sounds like
nonsense.
yeah.
Does, so that was bad. That was like 2016, 2017ish. But anyway, yeah, I think the vibe, it could be more ridiculous, sort of what I was just intimating there, I guess. It could be, you know, somebody in chat was saying it reminds him of Flashpoint, but Flashpoint was a bit more polished. Is obviously, like, I would say this is a step in the right direction if we're going to try to have a more relaxed feel. And I also feel like it's going to take a little bit before we see like the height of this approach, because like ESL even agreeing to let this happen to begin with feels like I don't know how they did it. I don't know how they convinced them to let them have more control, right? The talent, that is. And I know the talent were pushing big for this because that's all they were talking about publicly and privately. They were saying, like, really hope that this, you know, we're going to deliver something really good. Make sure you watch, you know, all this other stuff. And so it sounds like their skin is definitely in the game here, where, like, to some degree, based on viewership, based on sentiment, maybe, based on how the things turn out, it actually reflects on whether or not this will continue or whether they'll get even more control in the future. Obviously, I don't know the in between details of like how they've doled that out, but to me, it sounds like they are getting a little bit more creative freedom, and I definitely like that because they are the ones who are really trying to be part of the broadcast, in the sense they are the broadcast in many ways. And if you let them have a little bit more personality and show that off a little bit more often, then you're just going to get a project that they feel more genuine about. And I think that's going to sort of bleed in contagiously to how the fans react anyway. So far, yeah, I would say it has been interesting to feel it laid back. The people coming in sort of out of nowhere. I think they had Hooksy as a caster for a little bit. I always think that when players step into the casting role, you have to completely differently change your approach, because like they're not really going to cast. They're just going to be like, oh, crazy. Wow. Incredible. He doesn't.
Yeah, they're not
he can't do that.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, reacting almost like they're not even usually streamer personalities, let alone actual casters. So you don't even really get the same effect that you would get from watching like a co-stream or something, where like Flom is like flying out of his chair after every clutch or whatever. Like, you don't even get that. So what can you imagine doing there? It's like, kind of have to just be conversational, right? And so like that's almost like Joe Rogan fight companion stuff in some ways, where it's kind of interesting to get their insight and stuff. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. We'll see where it goes. Right now, at least it's a promising step, right? It doesn't feel quite so one note as some of the other broadcasts did in the past pro leagues. I'll say that much.
I think two key things happening right now. First of all, like, the vibe is obviously nice. You know, it's a switch up a little bit. I know that all the talent is super happy about it. You know, 100%. The thing is, like, the first key thing is the fact that everybody's in the same place. And that hasn't been happening for 3 seasons now.
Yeah.
Or even 5. No, I spent like 10 weeks in Katowice for 2 seasons of Pro League, and the whole the casters were in Malta together with the players, and it was frustrating for us, you know, not to be there with the players, because it's a completely different vibe of the show and everything. We have this in Katowice. It was like where they do the group stage, where there was a Hall of Heroes now and the big warehouse stuff. It's just when there is nobody there, is like 6 people plus the people from production. It feels like, I don't know, it demotivates you a little bit. Like, you cannot present like the proper show, and it's a little bit different because like right now everybody's in the same place. And I think the talent has more time now, in general, in between the maps, after the games, pre-games. And I know they enjoy that a lot because they always want to say a little bit more. You always want to include a little bit banter, a little bit of like breaking down the rounds. You want to bring a guest, and there is a space for everything, right? I think a product team in ESL did a good job switching it up. It doesn't have to be every time like Katowice and Cologne and now Dallas, Rio, whatever it is, right? So they use the Pro League as a more kind of a smart casual situation where they had like a no, not really a pro league, but not really a beyond the summit, right? It's somewhere in between, and they have these little props and skits and these little bits that I suggest. I think most of those things are coming from the talent itself,
Yeah.
the ideas, and you can see that the energy in them doing it is quite different. Like they're really enjoying what they're doing, especially like on that little post games or when they have somebody coming in, and even when they're casting, like you said, you bring a player and he's not there to hype the game and just get you to go nuts. He's gonna say like, listen, oh, you see this, like this guy was so delayed with the smoke, and that's why somebody get a good timing, and that's why they won around, and this is what these players are here for, pretty much, right? So overall, I believe it's a good switch up. I think more people are liking it than the one that you said, like hardcore fans that want to break down the rest. I think they have a lot of those in this Katowice type events, as we saw. Like I did the Katowice where we had like these telestrators and like these explanations and everything, which is perfectly fine for the event like that. But when it comes to Pro League, it's 5 months, it's 5 weeks, sorry, and it's like you said, it's a lot of games, and you wanted to make it entertaining. You don't want to make it like bland and vanilla, and it's just much better now. The only thing that I don't like is the new format.
Yeah.
Is I feel like they have embraced the blast format where like
Yeah.
you play 35 games in 14 different brackets and everybody qualifies for the playoff except EG, and you know it's just nonsense for me. I don't like the format where 4 teams are qualifying to 4 different brackets. It's just I don't see you see the game between who was it, Cloud9 and
Outsiders, maybe.
Outsiders. Yeah,
Yeah.
this was a boring game for me. Like that game, okay, the one team is going to the second round of the playoffs and one team is going to the quarterfinals. Yeah, cool. I managed to get like advantage of playing one less best of three. Yeah, cool, whatever. Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't have the value, for a spectator. For me, for example, I didn't watch that game. Didn't want to watch that game, and also the fact that outsiders are saving every single round. So that's
You had a good
that's
one where you were like, when outsider saves in the pistol. It's
did
just
you
all
see
these
that?
images.
Like, it's just
Yeah.
so hard, dude.
Yeah.
I gave up after that round. I
Yeah.
tweeted that, and I just gave up after that.
And then you go watch something more worth your time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, this is maybe stepping away from the format temporarily, but if you guys have seen, there was a Richard Lewis video, sort of like a stream cut together, where he was talking about how the current meta of CS is like the worst it's been in a long time.
Yeah.
And I've been sort of itching to get people's reactions to this because, on the one hand, I can totally see what he's saying when he's like, outsiders winning the major is like, oh, what a crazy travesty, blah blah blah, because of their style specifically and how like it isn't engaging to watch and it has all of these flaws. So there is that angle, and then there's obviously the angle in general of like, I think since the utility and since like the map pool has been shifted the way that it has been, the fact that you can utility drop gives CTs this like incentive to sort of just scuff out everybody, like choke them out and stop them from even moving. I think Inferno has really fallen by the wayside as a result of this. There were some statistics saying that like Inferno A site's the hardest site in the entire map pool to take, or to retake rather, and
Absolutely.
that's definitely like, it seems to be true. I think both sites in Inferno actually are really claustrophobic in that sense, right? Really difficult to breach. And because it's so difficult to do it successfully, and the economy is in the state that it's in, and you have the utility stuff, and you have the map pool in its current format, it's like there's so many things working against it. It's almost natural that like the outsiders sort of style, the VP style, would emerge and say, hey, here we are. This is the way to play CS. You might not like that, but this is peak form, and we definitely don't like it. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? Like, I know we watch some of the Pro League games, we watch all of the big marquee matchups and whatnot, but if it's not with a team that is able to be more X Factor, killer instinct, aggressive, whatever, it does feel like it devolves a lot into saving, and you just have to take more and more time out of your day to watch a single best of three than you ever did before. I feel like that's the vibe that I get anyway.
Yeah, I mean that's very true. I will certainly say I think it's made, and we've talked about this a little bit. Nade dropping also didn't really help, but it's made Inferno probably one of the more painful maps to watch. I don't know if that's because of the bomb radius going up. You just kind of immediately save and completely back off. They don't even try and go for exits or whatever. But I think
you think it would do the opposite, right? You think they'd be like, oh, they have to move out, so let's hope for the exits.
Right.
But they don't want that because they want to hold on to their guns, and so they aren't going to take a chance of losing the CT economy in that sense. Yeah,
yes,
really
they just kind of fully back off, and I think that it makes it sometimes like pulling teeth, to be honest, and really not that fun to watch. I think in terms, obviously I do a lot of casting and whatnot. I think that's sort of the same thing. Overpass can be a bit difficult at times. It's a bit more intricate at the very least. But it's still a pretty slow map, and it does just feel like the whole game has slowed down an awful lot over the past couple of years. I think we don't have these super fast, super aggressive kind of teams that find a lot of success. Heroic, I suppose, CT side always proactive, but we used to have a bit of a merchant that would just make things interesting and make things a little bit faster. And sometimes, I do find myself, you watch the lower down matchups like IHC, EG or whatever, or, when an IHC's playing or when a Fnatic's playing or something like this, a team that, maybe you don't know as much about. They're still finding their feet as a team. They're still trying to figure out what their MO is. And those teams can be a little more interesting to watch. But the fact of the matter is that the outsiders, save meta and all that kind of stuff that they have, and it's trickled down a little bit since winning the major, technically does work in a sense, right? If you look at the maths of it all, they get more rifle rounds. So that's kind of where it comes from. And I think that we have a lot of teams, a lot of players who play the highest percentage play. And although outsiders did, go down to Cloud9 in this one, I think that they still managed, again, to have more rifle rounds on average. So it's very tough, I think, to fully quantify, but I do feel like the way that the current meta has slowed the game down a lot, and maybe we just need, the days, I think the days of like explosive meta changes are gone as well. That certainly seems to be the way that Valve are now a little bit safer, right? Where before they were like, yo, here's a buffed Krieg, here's a buffed Org, go wild, and go wild for like the better part of a year and a half. Now it seems that we are onto more incremental changes, more map changes rather than weapon changes and things like that. And they also, with how dominant those guns were and the way that the Krieg affected like the sort of second round force buys, it's silly to play, let's say, but then I think that might have been a bit better to watch just because of the potential of excitement and, every round feels winnable because of the power of this weapon or whatever. So that it really depends on where you're at. At the same time, other, viewers like things to just make sense. They like the favorite to come out on top. And the favorite is generally the team that they're supporting. So, they just prefer things to make a bit more sense. And at the moment, it kind of does. The better team generally ends up winning. We've not got as many underdog Cinderella stories just because, it's like, well, if they win a cool round out of nowhere that's, really nice set round on the T side, we weren't expecting that, great contact flash or whatever it is, they can just save. And then it's like, well, now go and do that again. Make that happen again. You've had your one round that might be a bit cheesy or might be a bit lucky or whatever, but try and make that happen 2 or 3 rounds in a row. It's not going to, and our individuals are better than yours. So, based on that, we're going to win more rounds than you if we're playing our A game. So I think that we have a lot of that going on where it's like the competition element is missing a little bit. Favorite teams sort of come up and they generally do better rather than, these upsets and these underdog stories coming to full fruition. I don't know if you have any other thoughts to add, boys.
For me, it's like 2 things that are also like kind of affecting all of this. First of all is the economy, which is terrible when it comes to this. It forces people to save. Like outsiders saving, that's the right play.
Yes.
That is absolutely the right play. But the thing is, like, if they don't, like, if you reward them every time they save their money bonus, for example, 3.4, 2.9, 2.4, doesn't matter. Like, that's the right play always. Like, if you reward them with 0 or like less, more 50% of the money, it might be a little bit different, right? And also the design of the maps is quite favorable to people who are saving. For example, take Ancient, right? The entry stage of that map is favoring the T's quite a bit. Like on middle, if you do the smokes in cave and banana, A main, everybody's getting there first on the T side. And the cities naturally they don't want to fight in the early stages. Like if they get to their spot before us, why would we fight? We're gonna lose people and we're gonna lose the round. So they back off completely, right into the site, back off in like in a 2-1-2 setup, whatever. So they get pinched, they get stretched, and then they got split on. They lose two people on middle or on A and B, and then what the other three guys are doing? Saving, right? And every time that happens, and you take the other maps, except for example Vertigo, where everybody there is not a normal default going on early on, it's just ramp fights, and that's it, and some lurks on the B or middle. But the other maps, like for example Anubis, what are CTs gonna do? Like they can't do anything. They can peek B early on, and that's it. Like you can smoke off middle, you can smoke off everything else. You smoke off the connector in water, like and nothing you can do. And if you go into A, you kill the person in camera in the site, smoke it off. What are they gonna do? How can they retake it? They cannot. It's completely fucked the way the maps are designed. Like the cities can't do anything. Just remember, for example, how cobblestone was before. At least on the side holes, you get the CT advantage that they can go and push up and peek, and they can use the smoke and a molly and delay, and still have some sort of control of the A side, right? And in drop, you can re-smoke, you can fight, you can, the B plat can be, smoked off, and you can fight there. Not a lot of aggression there, but at least side holes is open for you to go aggressive. That's something. It's not perfect, but right now, if you look at Anubis, what can you do? You can't do anything. As a city, you try. That's why it's so T-sided map, and it's not going to be ready at least for another 2 updates, I believe. But all in all, I believe that the economy needs to change a little bit, and the map design needs to change a little bit. Maybe the prices of the guns or something like that needs to be a little bit different to kind of make people go for the round rather than saving all the time, and it will make CS more interesting to watch, because watching outsiders is literally getting you know knife in the eye every single round.
Yeah.
Like it's just terrible to watch. Even though they're, like I said, they're making the right plays. It's perfectly smart to save and go for it when you have the chance, and when you don't have the chance, just back off and keep buying and buying. It's very terrifying for the T side to deal with something like that, because the CTs are always buying, and it's hard enough to win a round sometimes. When you don't have a lot of utility and they saved and they have full utility, it's so hard. But like I said, it needs to change a few things, and a few maps needs to be redesigned, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, the critical thing that I would think of is like from the game designer's perspective, if the correct play becomes a really boring and annoying and tedious thing to watch and even to do, right? It can't be fun to just save forever. When that's the situation, then your game is flawed and it has to be corrected, right? And that's sort of what we're getting at. Some interesting points you brought up, Kassad, about Ancient and Anubis. I think the biggest issue that we're seeing with these maps is that the CTs have nowhere to fall back on and still be relevant on the site. Like they can't take forward pre-site positioning to meet this T's head on in an earlier stage or hold them there or whatever, and then they have to fall back into the site, right? Like Mirage A is kind of an example where you're playing on the site and then you're falling back, but you can retake that site. It's very different than a lot of the
You
other
can
cases.
start early on the ramp, right? You can start
absolutely,
deep smokes on the ramp to re-smoke it. You can place an op there on the ramp. You can play aggressive there, and they push you off. You go back to the site or under a balcony, and then if they push you off from there, then you can go. But they're going to use all of their utility to push you off,
Right,
so you're in a good spot. In Anubis and Ancient, you just die. That's it.
Yeah. You just get flashed off an angle and have to go back or something, right? And that's usually what ends up happening a lot of the time is you have these like consolidated points where you can kind of hold, but as soon as that falls back, then you're already retreating into a spot where you must retake. And it's usually without really draining the utility, as you were saying. And so I think that's probably the biggest flaw that map designers can maybe try to do some corrections with. I don't think that Valve has learned this lesson because they had Ancient. I think Anubis is better than Ancient, but it's also much newer. And to the degree that it's better on this particular thing, I think it's pretty much the same as far as this specific interaction we're talking about. But they still greenlit Anubis and then went for it, and now they own it. So it's not like the original mappers can come in and say, "Oh, well, I understand the map layout because I made it, so I'm going to correct the error in an elegant way or something." That's not even allowed anymore. Now Valve has to do it, and I don't think we've seen Valve actually correct this error even with Ancient. Right? They moved the CT spawn back or something just to try to fix it with the timing thing. But that's like
Made
the
it
worst
worse.
way you can solve it. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't even solve the problem as we saw. But also, even if it does, it's like, okay, now you're just holding W for like 2 extra seconds. How is that supposed to be? That's not an elegant solution to the
I
problem,
think
right?
the T's are gonna beat you there, and then you have to fall back.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
They beat you on middle. They beat you on cave because right now, if you run on the B side of Anubis and on Ancient on T side, you just run towards the catwalk or banana, you want to call left side, and you just flash it off, and that's it. Like they can't beat you.
Yeah.
And you just molly it, smoke it, whatever you want. You can play whatever you want, and the city just needs to back off. And then what happens if you hear a scope there from the city? You just take middle, you just take donut, you just take connector, and basically you can do whatever you want. And the cities, after you kill one or two, they go and play like outsiders. They just save. There's nothing they can do anymore. They can retake. Just imagine trying to retake that. It's easier maybe on the B side of Ancient to retake, but I think you mentioned it before. Like, how the hell do you retake A side on Inferno? It's unbelievably hard. It's terrible, right?
Yeah.
Graveyard, pit, headshot, side, back side, holes, short, whatever, right? It's just terrible.
And all,
if
all
they have
just-
even or yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say all just from like one moto smoke as well. Just kind of
Yeah.
it's not even like it's all that deep.
$300
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they just need to be a bit smart. Go B, bait out some of your utility with like one CT smoke, and then come back maybe one moto smoke, and then that's it, right? They've got all the utility out of the CT side that they need to, and
You can argue that like the cities have the positional advantage, they have the high ground and whatnot, right? That's fine, that's good, but the op is like 5k, and like you got vocabulary at 6k, and then the molly is 600, the M4 is 3.1. It's like everyone that uses the big one, so it's expensive, right?
Yeah.
And the FAMAS is garbage.
yeah, true.
The MP7, MP9 is all right, I guess. And then what do you buy then? Like there's MP9 and there is M4. Is there something in between? That's the problem as well. There's nothing in between.
But
Right?
the
There is
Galil's
nothing like
serviceable, so
yeah. If FAMAS was anywhere usable, maybe it will change things a little bit. But nobody buys FAMAS ever, right? And they just buy MP9 and they just buy M4 and OP, obviously. But even OG is barely used just on Anubis. But there's a lot of gaps right now that needs to be corrected. But because the CS is quite boring these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully it gets corrected. I'll say it definitely doesn't seem like the way to go. It is to inherit the blast format, which you were talking about earlier, Kassad. The triple elimination. Just saying triple elimination kind of sounds like a joke or something. Like here's my fictional tournament that's supposed to parody current CS. It's triple elim, but actually it is literally triple elim. And we saw there was some conversation about, I think it was a now deleted tweet from somebody at Fnatic complaining about the format because they won versus Eternal Fire earlier in the tournament, and then they had to play 2 best of 3s in the same day, defeating IHC and then Eternal Fire again, and that was their reward. Even though obviously they were at a disadvantage, you would say, if you have to play 2 best of 3s
right?
in the same. Yeah.
And it reminds me of a tournament, if you remember, in Belek in Turkey. Like we played that as Renegades, one of the last events we played as Renegades before we went to 100 Thieves. We placed like third. But it was a similar, like, double, triple elimination where, like, you have, like, 15 different lives. I remember, was it MIBR was there and they lost, like, 14 times and just couldn't get eliminated. And it was just, I know for a fact that players don't like it. They don't like those type of formats. It just makes no sense. I know for the viewers and, like, have the more, like, on-air time and, the sponsors and everything is being, like, visible and stuff. But there's a point where you need to say, like, listen, double is fine.
Yeah.
Triple, not so much.
Yeah, all I can really think is that we don't have this like 3 games concurrent on the final day, so that they can do all, like you say, a bit more airtime, get more viewership in on the mainstream that they kind of need to at the end of the day. Because it opens up, and that first day has a B stream, I think, maybe the second, I can't quite remember, but definitely that first day has a B stream, and then everything else was just out on the mainstream nothing to worry about. So that seems to be a pretty big driving factor behind it, which again, maybe I like talking about the broadcast side of things. Maybe I can get behind from a viewership standpoint, but from the competitive integrity standpoint, not so much. At the same time, what I will say about Pro League is that they have constantly change the format around, because I think they use it as a bit of an experimental zone to maybe, see how these formats look, see how they work. Maybe that's part, again, of the draw of Pro League, is that it's always going to be different. You never really get the same product over and over again, especially because, during the COVID era, it was pretty much the exact same show for like a year, whether it was Katowice or whether it was Cologne. It was all based on the sort of Pro League formula, let's say. So I think that maybe they're trying to open it up a little bit more, make it a bit more interesting, but it's difficult to quantify, especially, again, like you say, when players don't really like this type of format. We do get some weird matchups, we do get some weird games, right? And I think that that sort of thing we can't really get behind. But it does seem like we are, unfortunately, in this game in a little bit of a perpetual loop of like having maybe a format that works, but then viewership wise it's really hard to keep track of everything, or a format that doesn't quite work and doesn't do well for the players, but it's actually a lot easier to watch. I think that the triple elimination format was a bit easier to watch. Maybe the one criticism I will give it from like a broadcast standpoint is that it was a bit difficult to understand, right? That we have like this one game where 2 teams qualify, and then we have so many other games where one team gets put into playoffs round 2 or whatever, and then the other team gets put into playoffs round 3. Still not fully gone in, you know what I mean? I'm not sure.
That was the Cloud9
exactly
Outsiders
right?
game.
Yeah, exactly. But both those teams qualified, so it's kind of like, well, why are we here? We have gotten rid of third place deciders, which used to be pretty rampant in the scene, and they were like, why are we doing this? But it certainly seems like we are rotating back around to a couple. The Blast format is already there, as you're kind of saying, like borrowing little bits from the Blast format, where it's like we have these almost redundant games. It's like it's cool to get more Counter-Strike, but the players, I would imagine, don't enjoy those games because it just feels like a bit of a nothing game. Like, why are we playing? We've already qualified. That's what we set out to do. Sure, we might qualify a little bit deeper, but if anything, you want more Counter-Strike to play, surely. So, it's.
But I want more interesting game, like more valuable games, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's just something like everything is better than Swiss, let's say it like that. But the thing is, like, remember, like the GSL system with like 4 teams in the group. That's what I would use, like but only best of 3s, like no best of 1s. Remember, it was like GSL 2 best of 1s, and you're in the playoffs. That was garbage, right? But if you have 4 teams like seeded correctly, in a best of 3 playing GSL system, and the 2 teams are going to the playoffs in those quarters, that would make more sense. Not even the Pro League, but also with other events. When you have 16 teams, like just you have the first stage of the major, you have obviously challenger stage and 16 teams there. See them correctly by the rankings, and have 4 teams in the group. First seed against the 4th, second against the 3rd. The winners plays winners, and people who win twice, they're through. People who lose twice, they're out in a best of 3, and that should be it. You have 4 groups like that, and I think that's the change a little bit of the dynamic, because this for now and these formats are just not so entertaining to watch for me. It's just when I have, like, for example, FaZe played. Who did they play? Vitality and Cloud9 in the first 2 games in the major, and they lost both of them in a best of 1.
Yeah.
And that's on the same day. That should never happen.
Yeah.
That should never be a thing. Like, I know it's a major. It should be cutthroat and it's fine, but it should be more entertaining than that, and it should be more structured than that. Simply because, like, you can say, like, how can FaZe play Vitality in the first round and Cloud9 in the second? Yes, Cloud9 lost as well, but it should never be the thing. Like, it should be 4x4 in the GSL, and that's how we would get the best playoffs possible. Like, what was the last time we had a really sick playoffs, like playoff brackets? Like I can't even remember, right? Every time
Like
there's
the whole way through it. Like maybe
yeah,
you get a
yeah,
good
yeah.
final or something.
I mean,
but
yes,
that's
we
it.
had in Katowice 7 teams out of 8. That was the probably the best one in years, I think. Like, but before that, every time when you look at the major, especially, like it's always this weird quarterfinals. We saw that was it Berlin where Astralis played Liquid, and we played against MIBR, and then it's like Avangard played against Vitality, then Avangard played against us in the semis. It's like it's not what people want to see. Like it's very weird, but it's sometimes that happens. But I think we should just decrease the chance of that happening, right? That's all. And if the lower seeded team qualifies for the playoffs from the first position, that's fine. That's okay. That's cool. But seed teams correctly, and then let's go for it.
Harder to do if you have like 8 teams in a group or whatever it is, right? So that's probably, I mean, that's where the GSL suggestion comes in for sure for me. And I kind of, is it just me, or is like everybody suggesting the GSL solution and nobody's trying it? Like, what was the last GSL TO or tournament rather?
Can't
Like, I
remember.
actually
But
can't remember.
I'm sure it's gonna come back at some point
Yeah.
if we whine enough.
Yeah.
Maybe I should put a bounty on that one or something.
There you go. Yeah.
I think it's definitely just because it was a format for a while there that we maybe have a little bit of post-traumatic stress about, because it's a little bit like you mentioned the BO1s and stuff like that.
That's
for a while
garbage.
there. Yeah,
up,
they were so bad. So I think maybe they're worried that if they bring back the GSL, someone's gonna come creeping in and be like, maybe we should add best of ones to it again, and some,
Well, the thing
some
is, like,
product
they
managers
wanted to
gonna
avoid best of ones, and they
go for a
put
retro
like in
one.
other best of ones in a Swiss. Like have
Yeah.
FaZe being 0-2 at the first day.
Yeah.
It's just terrible.
Yeah. Dreadful.
Not a fan.
Let's talk a little bit more about the results then of Group A. I think that would be a nice spot. We've got about half an hour or so left on this one, so we can chat about where they're at. Maybe set up Group B a little bit as well if you want.
Sure.
Totally open to that. But as we see, we have this opening sort of matchups and whatnot. Then we have the last chance stage. So I think we'll just kind of encompass them all into one. Cloud9 beating Outsiders. That's the one that I'm going to zone in on a little bit to begin with. I think that this is a matchup that normally expected to go that way. Cloud9 looked pretty dreadful at Katowice. They were still bedding in their recent addition of Buster, but ultimately they disappointed. We were expecting bigger things, and people also have been very critical of the Buster move, saying that it's not the move that should happen. It should be Nafani, who has many different names at this point, bless him. Especially courtesy, of course, courtesy of Maui Snake on a few of those. But yeah, I think that this team, maybe looks a little bit hotter. It was a pretty hard fought kind of battle up until the very end of the series. They put in a clinic on the T side of Ancient, really shut down Outsiders and just absolutely ruined them. So I think that Cloud9, maybe looking a little bit better, and Outsiders, unfortunately for them, they're still at the same spot. They've won the major, but they're still at that spot where they're a bit of a gatekeeper team. They can easily take down teams below them. Then they come up against someone around their sort of ilk, and their style of game gets figured out by the better teams, and they just can't make it past them.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say you're zoning in on Outsiders. I'm zoning out on them, Scriv. I just no interest, zero interest. No, I think the funny thing was you said that they handily dispatched teams below them or something to that effect. I just want to point out their series against Fnatic was a 2-0, and it took 3 hours, because that's the kind of team Outsiders. 16, 14, 16, 12. No OTs, by the way. Still 3 hours.
It's garbage. The thing is, like, when you see all teams like Outsiders and Cloud9, looking at Cloud9, they were dreadful at Katowice.
Yeah.
Just lost to IHC. It was just a very underwhelming performance from everyone, And Buster, like, looked. We even did a telestrator for a couple of things where Buster, I think so actually, or we talked about it. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, like, where Buster was completely lost on B side of Mirage, just running into walls kind of situation, like missing smokes, missing timing, just running behind his team. It just, as a CT, it's just terrible, how it looked like. But and they as a team, they look bad because none of their stars performed also well. But you look at the Pro League now in the group stage, they qualified for the quarters relatively easy. They dismantled G2 like it was nothing, and then they beat Outsiders in that stupid game. They could have finished it 16-14 in the second map, and then Nafani called something, God knows what was it on that 14-14 round. But the thing is, like, overall, Cloud9 again presenting the same picture like they did before. Group stage are doing very well, qualifying for the playoffs. But when they hit the playoffs, it's nothing. So we have to wait and see a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody trusts them at this point. They're not really a team like that's people are scared of. They're more scared of Exile and Shiro rather than Cloud9. Like, because if you look at Astralis, for example, you were scared of Astralis.
Yeah.
Like, you were scared of Liquid. Or well, not MIBR, but Luminosity SK, whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Fnatic, you were scared of the team. Well, look at Cloud9 right now. You're scared of Shiro and Exile. You're not scared of Nefani or Buster or, doesn't really matter. Like, it's just, you're scared of the individuals, and that's not how you're gonna, be winning titles. If they improve of their, game and see how they can do better in the playoff games and, fix their problems for being stale and stuff and very predictable, yes, they can win events again. If they don't do that, then no, they're going to be same old team that's going to be doing well in the group stage and, sucking in the playoffs. But when it comes to outsiders, still, like, that style of play is so annoying to watch. But they have very sharp individuals, all of them. Like, everybody can step up. You can say that Kickert is their worst player, statistically, or whatever. Like, even Kyron is playing. I was standing behind him for a couple of games in Katowice. The guy is super sharp. He has fundamental issues with some, the rotations, the utility, and all that stuff that's very fixable. But when it comes to raw aim and skill, it's there. And obviously we have the other players like Flit and, Fame, who already proved what he can do, and James is, doing his thing. So they're always a threat to everyone. Can they perform the same thing from the major where they played, almost without a mistake? I don't know. Are they a threat? Yes, simply because of two things: the style they run and the individuals they have, right? How is that going to last? How long is that going to last? We don't know. But that would be the short sum up of those two teams. I think both deserve to be in the playoffs of the Pro League. And who is the third one is G2 and the fourth one is Fnatic, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Or yeah, they beat Eternal Fire in that last game. So I don't know. Overall, I think it's pretty expected from the Group A. Maybe even with Fnatic qualify, even if Eternal Fire qualify, that would be a little bit of a surprise. I think right now it's something we would expect. Maybe we would put G2 a little bit higher because of the form, but the teams that are supposed to be in playoffs, they're in the playoffs.
Fnatic is one of a weird sort of caliber of team. I almost kind of grouped them together with Maus, actually, where they obviously showed us some pretty surprising ceilings, maybe, or peaks at the major recently, but they afterwards seem to not really be delivering to the same level. I mean, I know Fnatic won the Eliza Invitational. I think they had a stand-in at that point. I think they were still using Jaquinho. Anyway, they showed some heights, right? And we obviously back a lot of the veteran players in this roster, specifically Crims. I think Mezzi's pretty legit as well, especially if he can sort of take the IGL burden off his shoulders to some degree. But it feels to me like this team is destined to almost oscillate like a lower level of Cloud9 in some way, where they'll do well at a certain tier of event, and then they just can't maybe get to that next step. And it's weird because like it's just not a roster you would necessarily think would work on paper. It's this very weird eclectic mash. But I like the when they look good, when they're on form and all this other stuff. I like the look of the team, but I do feel like while you would say yes, they are the fourth team out, they're probably not going to go deep another layer, right? I think they're probably their ride stops in the very first round of playoffs for me.
Yeah, I would have preferred to maybe see Eternal Fire over them, to be honest with you. I think that Eternal Fire are a pretty impressive team at the tier 2, played so much Counter-Strike recently, and a little bit the Anubis Merchants at the moment, really solid on that map. It was like the one map that they managed to find against Fnatic anyway. But yeah, I would have maybe preferred to see what Eternal Fire could do, because I think at Fnatic, you're right, are just, at a spot where, things just aren't really playing out very well for Fnatic. Just... Yeah, I don't know. A team that they're very old, right? They don't have much impressiveness in terms of the youth. A few more supportive elements. A lot of tier 2 kind of riflers and AWPers and stuff like that are playing at a higher level. And again, another gatekeeper kind of team, but at a lower level, like you mentioned. Very similar to outsiders in the way that they function. I'm just not too sure that they can really break through this ceiling at all. Maybe with a couple of the members, but it looks like Crim's actually, I would say that his days are a little bit numbered. He seems to be dropping and performing weaker and weaker tournament on tournament. Maybe they're trying to change him around. They don't really have a star rifler, so to speak. The Orping's not too bad, but I don't know that Fnatic can really go any higher than this without some kind of a change coming in.
Yeah, I mean, when they created, it was a little bit weird, like with that lineup. First of all, you mentioned it before, and I completely agree. It's the fact that they don't have like many young players, right? There's like 28, 29, 27, whatever, and there is Messi, right? Who is 22 or 23 or something.
24, and then Nico Dawes is 22, I believe. So he's the youngest gun.
Okay.
And it's like,
So
that's really your youngest player.
The thing
That's
with
crazy.
them is the problem is obviously consistency. Like if you look at Roy and Nikodos, I watched them against, for example, in Katowice, I was again behind them. And watching them against Vitality on Mirage, where they just slammed everyone. Like whoever came across from them, they just slammed them. It was 16-3. They won they were down like 2-0 and they won 16-4 or something like that. And you can see like, okay, can they can beat anyone if they play like that.
Yeah.
But then you can see the games where they're just nowhere to be seen, like ghosts. And when it comes to Crims, I think yes, he has an expiration date. Is he a Hall of Famer? Absolutely. Does he have an expiration date? Yes, as well. So I don't know how long is he going to be able to be the firing pin, I guess, the firepower in the team. He can be a supportive element in a stronger team. You know, some like something that. I don't know who would be the best example, but the thing is, like, you can put him in a little bit of a different role because he's a skilled player. He doesn't have to be a star player anymore. You can put somebody else there, and you can keep him in Fnatic, you know, and just rebuild a little bit. But for me, the biggest issue is Fasher, right?
Yeah.
Like, he started off very well. He showed some skill. He's also, 27 years old, 28. He played in Lowland Lions for a long time, and just all of a sudden he's in Fnatic. So that's for me, he's most inconsistent and the one with the weakest performance, and that's why they cannot get over the hurdle, which is outsiders. If you look at their team and compare it, just compare those two teams, and you can see that, like, you know, Fasher against Fame, who would you rather have, right?
Right.
Split against Roy, who would you rather have? So it's a thing where they need to think about for the next year. I think they can live through this season and the next one up until the end of 2023. But somewhere in the middle of it, let's say July or August, if I'm GM, if I'm Karn, if I'm like whatever, I'm thinking, where am I going with the 2024 lineup? I have the talented Messi, who is super good, best player in their team, absolutely by far, even though he's the IGL. Do I want him as an IGL? Maybe I can get somebody else to be the IGL. Maybe I can rebuild against this team. Okay, want to keep the Nikodos, give him another year? Fine. He got some credit. But then what do we do with Crims, Roy, and Fasher? Do we remove those players? Do we keep Crims and get two new Fame/Fleet talents and maybe do something, right? Because there are those talents, and I would go into that direction if I was Fnatic. I would, you know, survive this year as it is and look for the change in 2024, but obviously start looking right now or somewhere in June, July, whatever.
Yeah, plan ahead, right?
There surely has to be a team that, you know, needs more out in terms of the name value and everything like that. They've got to have a little bit more available to them as well in terms of finance. But I think, like you say, Kassad, there are definitely some pieces of this team that could work. They just don't have the extra oomph to really get past this, and I think, you know, are sort of destined to top 15 sort of placings in HLTV rankings and stuff like that. I'm talking about, obviously, the odd.
They had the chance to get Dexter, man. You know, they had the chance to get Dexter. They didn't, right?
Yeah.
He would be a massive upgrade. So continue. Sorry.
Even still,
no,
they're number 9 in the world right now with this lineup, which is wild to think about.
I don't know.
I mean, that ranking is broken. So
yeah. We've all taken shots at it. I will say, you were talking earlier, Kassad. Do you rather have Flit or Roy? I mean, we got a big Roy fan here in the bottom with Script.
Yeah, he's like one of the only pro players I have blocked. So, you know, just because
he couldn't handle the smile, he couldn't handle the emotion.
He got on my nerves one day, and I just decided maybe the block list needs beginning.
Sometimes has to be that way, you know.
Yeah. So I would always take Flit every day.
There it is.
But, you know. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Fnatic we want better for them. I think as fans of the game, as fans
Yes.
of the org, we want better for them. And
Yeah.
you know, as said, there are definitely a few pieces out there that maybe they could delve into. They're obviously happy to go for an international lineup, so there's a lot more that they.
There is
could find.
Nexa also, just shout out right
Yeah.
there.
True, that's true. I think we'd all like to see Messi a little bit unleashed. When I don't know if you guys caught him on the endpoint team, sort of the very short tenure that he had there. I think he was on a short contract, obviously for a reason, and he kind of single-handedly carried them to like nearly top 20 status for a little while. So
He's pretty
Yeah.
good.
yeah. So I think it'd be nice to see him unleashed. But that's actually not a bad shout. I think Nexa would be pretty good in this team, to be honest.
Yep.
Speed them up a little bit, and that would
Yep.
be pretty good.
Well, his
Would be a
style
good
would even
upgrade.
work
That's why
well.
they pay
you'd
him the
think.
big bucks.
Yeah.
It would be
Yeah.
an upgrade, definitely, but the thing is, like, we don't know what's going on in OG. That's another subject. Like, I don't even know what that team is going to do. Like, they're so, like, unpredictable, and
Yeah.
you cannot really place them. And they're number 8, like, on the same rankings that we were looking at. Like,
Yeah.
it's how?
How indeed.
Well,
Well,
no.
that is the wacky thing with OG, because I feel like they have this like Alexi B guy. He's a pretty good IGL. I don't know if you guys know that, and at least I believe he's he could actually turn, depending on the next year and this year and stuff. He could be a quite legit like Hall of Famer IGL at the end of his career. We'll see, but like he seems to have the ability to, and then. OG are like, so you get no stars, and then he leaves, and they're like, all right, let's get the fraggers, and it's like, bro, you could have done that like. I don't know, like just that approach is so
Makes
weird
no
to me.
sense. Yeah.
That they've gone, they zigged when they should have zagged like twice in the same sort of thing, and now it looks like they're losing Nexa, who is like the loose collar, and also not. I mean, talk about Messi being an IGL, but like he's a top fragger in spite of that. Like I feel like Nexa kind of has a similar situation to him, where he could be a very legit fragger.
You know what I would do? I would
Go
keep
ahead.
Nex. I would get Nex as a player in Fnatic, not as an IGL. I would
Right,
get another player to be the IGL for that team.
Yeah.
And then you have two monsters in the team, which is Nexa, who is what, 22, 23? And you have obviously Messi, who is, you said is 24. And then you have Nikodos, who is 22, right? And then obviously keep Crims. Just decrease his importance a little bit when it comes to like numbers. He doesn't have to have 25 every time like he did before. And then you have the normal IGL, somebody decent IGL. It can be like a potential young IGL. It's fine. It can be also an experienced one. You can mix it up any way you like it, right? Just get those other pieces in order, and then it will work. But again, you will see. I don't know what's the financial situation in Fnatic. Actually they have money or not, or because it's right now. You know that we are only in recession right now, and it's all got fucked. So I wouldn't be surprised, like, if some of the orgs just pull out at all completely.
Right, yeah.
And one of those orgs would probably be OG.
Yeah, you'd assume OG would probably be on the move. Their
Especially if they're
team's-
losing a key piece, right?
I feel
Scriv?
like as well, their team's not really found any success ever, to be honest. Like, not a
And
little bit.
you associate them with winning the majors in Dota.
Yeah,
and-
right.
Yeah,
They expect big things, so I think that they're happy if they make it to the major. That's how it goes at OG.
Oh yeah, wasn't it?
So
Wasn't it something wild that Rio was their first major as an org or something
I think
like
it might
that?
have been, yeah.
Which is so weird to think, because they've been around for a few years now, and that you'd think, again, like Kassad says, you associate that org's name and symbol and all this other stuff with excellence, and yet their first major, obviously they don't even make it past Vitality to go to the main stage, right? They get banged out in the
Yeah, who
challenge
knows?
stage.
There might be a team that have kind of grown their fan base, so to speak, by moving across into CS. People who might already know them from Dota but decide to watch CS or whatever, and now they can support them in 2 games or something. Like, I don't really know. That's the only arc that I can see for OG being effective, really.
I don't think anybody is excited by for EG for EG too, but for OG when they see like they're playing, like unlike Dota, you see OG playing. I don't follow Dota all that much. I do, but when I see OG playing, I'm gonna jump in and watch, right? Because it's interesting to me because of the name and the legacy they have and everything they did. But when I see OG playing CS, I just go somewhere else.
no point.
I mean, fair enough at the end of the day. Yeah. Last team to talk about them from the Group A side of things would be G2. We briefly mentioned them, that they get knocked down by Cloud9. Yeah, I think that, ultimately the G2 squad kind of proving to be a little bit mortal, but they're still making it through. I would have put them towards the higher end, but that Cloud9 game is a relatively difficult one. I think that they handily beat outsiders if they come up against outsiders, but, Cloud9 is not necessarily kryptonite, but a team that I think, Clash of Styles and all that sort of stuff. Also, an absolutely insane game by Shiro. I don't know if you guys caught it, but he was
just
not
unplayable,
missing.
basically.
Yeah, plus 40 nearly. So as I'm checking back through the numbers here. So yeah, he was really impressive. And in all fairness, a team, that, like I say, Clash of Styles wise, I think G2 would struggle against the way that Cloud9 approach things.
Oh, you remember
The problem
Cloud9
is-
was the anti-phase. Now, if G2 are going to be the new phase, Cloud9 can still be the anti-phase. I don't know. There's something there. There's some weird
The
connection.
problem is
where
the
they
map
can
pool,
do
right?
it.
They are not
Yeah.
playing Nuke, which is the good map for G2, and they're
Right,
playing
right.
Vertigo as their first pick, which is a bad map for G2. So they're always going to have that kind of edge on them, double edge kind of. They have the new removing Nuke and picking Vertigo. So unless G2 improves on Vertigo, it's going to always be a one map for Cloud9. And if they, avoid playing, Inferno against G2, that's another win for Cloud9. But it's also G2 didn't have like so spectacular games even from the start. Like even against Eternal Fire at the beginning, they had some problems. Against Fnatic, they lost Nuke 16-3, 16-4. So it's beginning to starting to getting back to what it was before, right? Yes, was G2 the best team in the last couple of months? Absolutely. Can they do it all the time? No fucking way. Nobody can. It's just it requires more to be a team that kind of dictates the era, right? Like for example, Astralis did. Like they had the team play, they had individual skill, they had everything. Right now, G2 they play the best because the stars, all the stars combined, played out of their minds, winning 2v5s, 3v5s, 1v2s, 1v3s all the time. Not to mention remember the graphic about like the pistols and the round two conversion. It's like they won like 12 pistols in a row or some shit, and when then they lose the pistols, they won 100% of the following rounds. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you cannot like expect that to happen all the time. Where do they fall back when it starts going down? How many rounds are they gonna win their maps? And it's starting to get down. I just afraid that it doesn't get all the way down like it was before the last RMR when the things haven't been going so well, and you're gonna be facing some of those teams again. And then if you go to the RMR and you can see the groups there.
Yes.
And let's see, down there in the B groups, that there's Heroic, Cloud9, Ants, Vitality, NIP, Spirit, all dangerous teams. Even that Eternal Fire, it's dangerous teams in a best of one. It's not easy thing to deal with in such a cutthroat competition. So it's they made it through. That's the important part, right? It wasn't the best, but it's better than what other teams had, and I guess that counts.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of leads me nicely into my ultimate question for G2 is, do we actually think they're going to be a consistent top one team? Do we even think there's going to be a consistent number one team this whole year? Because I kind of feel like a mix of the meta conversation we were talking about earlier and why maybe CS is not as fun to watch anymore. Like part of the other downstream effects of that seems to be that like it's really hard to stay consistent just because of the like erratic nature of the game. But then we're also seeing G2. Obviously, they have this crazy success at Katowice. They drop only one map, I think, in the entire tournament. It was in the finals versus Heroic, and it's like these guys are crazy on form. What happens when JKS isn't, putting up potential MVP level numbers, right? Like, because that's not his role in the team necessarily. And what happens when maybe some of your stars are cooling off a little bit, right? And FaZe were able to sort of do it by committee of stars, but I don't know if G2 can still do that because we haven't seen them do that yet, right? We have to wait and see. But do we feel like G2 is actually going to be the biggest dog on the block, or is this maybe just the sign of it's just going to continue fluctuating back and forth between a bunch of different teams? What do we think?
I still think they will. I think that there's been plenty of teams underneath them at the moment, that ultimately don't look as strong. Like who do we put next, right? Is it still FaZe? Would it be Heroic? Probably, right? You'd put as like the second most consistent team out there, but they don't quite have the ceiling, I think, to dominate in the same way. Na'Vi we know are capable, but still, betting in a new talent and everything like that. So there's a lot of question marks around the other teams, and it seems like G2 are just the only one that remains the most consistent. And I think indeed have the strongest individuals at the moment. FaZe, you might say, individually have the highest ceiling. There's a lot of these kind of like caveats that you can put, right? Heroic have probably like the best team play at the minute, and therefore can be difficult to work around if one of their star players kind of pops off. They have the best formula to win rounds, right? So it can be really difficult, I think, to quantify it, but I just think that G2, you know, they seem to have hit the groove. They've got HooXi working a little bit better, which was the main concern when this team came together, and then was a concern for a while when, you know, they didn't make a major. That never helps. But I do feel like this G2 squad should still be the strongest team coming into the playoffs of Pro League. Pro League's always a really good barometer for stuff like that as well, right? We have all the teams, all the games. You feel like you get sort of like the rightful winners. When it gets to the end, I think, are we getting a BO5 out of it? I can't find on HLTV.
It was BO5 last year,
but
so
usually they are, right? So I would assume that we get all the games, all the Counter-Strike, all the teams, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So usually you are facing off against, you know, a favorite to take you down, a team that has the different style that, you know, might be able to upset you or indeed prove to be better than your style, right? You have a long game at the end if you do make it to the final that makes sense. And you have the qualification system means that they've played against a large field of teams. So, you know, they're not there by luck. They're there because they indeed deserve to be. So Pro League is always good for stuff like that. Usually does result in some, you know, we talked about how many banging playoffs have we had. Usually Pro League's pretty good because, you know, the groups are split in such a way that you have favorites. Favorites generally tend to win. Very rarely are there upset. Even if you do actually lose a game, we've got this triple elimination bracket now. So, you know, you can come back from the G2. Obviously, they lost a game, and then they clean up house in their next two games, right? There's no sweat off the brow.
The thing is, like you said, the concern was HooXi playing better, and he did for like what 2 months, and now in the group stage he was the worst rated player by far in all of them. It you know, minus 77 in 9 maps and 0.71 rating. That's by far the worst player of the first group, right? And the thing that's good for them right now is m0NESY playing like crazy, like super good, right? He is not missing almost anything, and just let's say right now, G2, are they gonna be the contender, like thought of like considered a contender for any event they play right now? Yes. Are they gonna win? That's a different story, right? The thing is, like, if you decrease by 10% their, you know, performance from the Katowice, where do they land? Like, do they land in the winning bracket again, or do they land in some sort of top 6, top 8? Like, it's very, because Hunter, Nico, m0NESY, JKS all played insanely well all together on that event. You know, nobody was slacking. Like, there was 4 players playing extremely well, and that's what got them into the position where they wanted. Like, fair and square, they were the best team. Nobody challenges that. But how often will that happen? You know, we have to take account into FaZe. They're not going to struggle forever. Vitality as well. We didn't consider them. Heroic is there. Navi can get sort their shit out and start playing well again. That's a team that's a threat. Now Cloud9 can be a thing. Outside, there's like so many teams that are actually, you know, going for that #1 spot. It's not so easy. And can G2 do it again? Yes. Will they do it? That's very unlikely.
I did just confirm you were right. HooXi is on the bottom of the stats so far, which is potentially, I mean, if you're hoping that the fragging continues to hold for G2, then like he's got to maybe fix that situation just so that you have a little bit more insurance of like, okay, if JKS does drop down 10%, I need to get, you know, 30% better.
What if they win like, what do they have, like 70% win rate on the pistols? What if that drops to 50?
Sure.
What the conversion drops a little bit more, the individual performance drops a little bit more. Where do they land? Like it's a problem. And we forgot about FaZe. Like the FaZe is just still there. I think they're gonna be in the next 3 months super strong. I don't think that's gonna last anymore. So that's another threat there. So it should be a very interesting 3 months coming up in terms of like who's gonna win things. The quality of CS is not the best one. But that's not because of the players, it's because of the meta and the economy and the maps. We discussed that. But
overall, I think it should be fun being on the sidelines watching, you know, all these things happening in the next couple of months till the end of the season.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
A little bit of optimism, a little bit of fun we can have. Just ignore the outsiders games.
Yeah, right.
And
You know
all
how
the
they're
NA
gonna
stuff
go.
besides EG.
You just need to
Yeah,
catch
yeah.
the results.
There you go.
All right, cool. I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. If we're all done, I think that covers what the results have looked like recently. We've had a bit of a review, a bit of a look at the results, a bit of a meta conversation. Always good to have as well. You know, a big brain to pick from, of course, in the form of Kassad's brain. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, either
You
way.
almost got it.
You landed somewhere. That's
Yeah, just about. I think I landed on one foot instead of two, but nonetheless. Thank you very much once again for coming on, Kassad. Been a great show as always, and thank you very much for watching at home. That's been it for the Off Angle this week. We will catch you again with another one in the next week.
You're gonna love this video right here. You're gonna love it. Check it out right now.